The restaurant was packed that evening. The sound of clinking glasses, laughter, and murmured conversations filled the air. Sarah moved swiftly between the tables, balancing plates with practiced ease. She had been working here for 3 years, and though the job was exhausting, it paid the bills, mostly. At a corner table sat a man who seemed out of place. His sharp suit, expensive watch, and the air of quiet authority he carried made him stand out in the casual diner. But what truly caught Sarah's attention was the boy sitting next to him. He was about 10 years old, his head resting against the wheelchair's cushioned support. His body was frail, and his eyes, though bright, held a quiet sadness. The billionaire father looked at his son with concern, but there was a distance between them, an invisible wall neither knew how to break. Sarah approached with a warm smile. "Good evening. Can I get you something to drink?" The man barely looked up. "Just water for me." The boy, however, smiled at her. "Can I have hot chocolate?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if he wasn't used to asking for things. Sarah winked. "One hot chocolate, coming right up." As she turned away, she caught the father watching her, his expression unreadable. She had seen that look before, rich people who came in, but never truly saw the people serving them. She shrugged it off. When she returned with the drinks, she noticed the boy struggling to lift the cup. His hands trembled, and Sarah instinctively reached out, steadying it for him. He looked up in surprise, then grinned. "Thank you." His father watched silently, his fingers tightening around the glass of water. As the night went on, Sarah noticed how the billionaire father barely spoke to his son. He ordered food, but when the boy struggled to eat, he simply looked away, his jaw tight. Something about it tugged at Sarah's heart. When she passed by again, she saw the boy staring at his plate, frustration evident on his face. The utensils were too difficult for him to hold. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, gently scooping up some mashed potatoes and holding the fork near his mouth. The boy hesitated, glancing at his father, who simply observed with an unreadable expression. Slowly, the boy took a bite. "You know," Sarah said softly, "when I was little, my mom used to feed me the same way when I was sick. There's nothing wrong with a little help." The boy smiled, and for the first time that evening, he looked happy. His father remained silent. As Sarah continued serving other tables, she felt his gaze following her. There was something intense in the way he observed, something more than just idle curiosity. When the bill was settled, the billionaire and his son left without a word. Sarah sighed, shaking her head. She had learned a long time ago that people like him rarely acknowledge people like her. The next evening, they returned. This time, the father watched closely as Sarah interacted with his son. She joked with him, helped him eat, and even taught him a little trick to hold his spoon better. The father spoke suddenly, his voice deep and measured. "How long have you worked here?" Sarah blinked, surprised he was addressing her. 3 years. "You seem good with children." She shrugged. "I love kids. They just need patience and kindness." He was silent for a moment before saying, "You didn't hesitate to help my son." "Why?" Sarah frowned. "Because he needed help." Most people might have been intimidated by the man's wealth, but Sarah spoke plainly. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if her answer unsettled him. That night, he left a generous tip. Over the next week, they kept coming back. And each time, Sarah noticed a change. The billionaire father started speaking to his son more, asking him questions, helping him eat. He was awkward, unsure, but he was trying. One evening, after the boy had fallen asleep in his wheelchair, the father spoke again. "My wife used to do everything for him." His voice was quiet. "I never learned how." Sarah sat across from him, resting her arms on the table. "You're learning now." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Yes." That night, he left an envelope for her with the manager. Inside was a letter. "Sarah, your kindness has made me realize something I should have understood long ago. I failed my son, but you reminded me that love isn't just providing, it's being present. I want to offer you something. Meet me tomorrow." Sarah's heart pounded as she reread the letter. The next day, she found herself standing outside a towering skyscraper, the company's name gleaming in gold letters above the entrance. She hesitated before stepping inside. She was led to an office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The billionaire sat behind a massive desk, his son next to him, beaming when he saw her. "I want to give you a better opportunity," the man said. "Not just money, a career. You have a gift with children. If you're willing, I'll pay for your education to become a therapist for kids like my son. No strings attached." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because you changed my son's life. And mine." Tears pricked her eyes as she glanced at the boy, who was looking at her with hope. A lump formed in her throat. "I don't know what to say." The billionaire extended his hand. "Say yes." Sarah reached out, shaking his hand, her voice trembling. "Yes." And just like that, her life changed forever. Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the billionaire's hand, her mind spinning. She had never been given an opportunity like this before. All her life, she had struggled, worked long hours, and barely made ends meet. And now, here she was, sitting in a skyscraper, being offered a future she never even dared to dream of. The billionaire's son, Ethan, grinned. "Does this mean you'll still hang out with me?" Sarah chuckled, wiping at her eyes. "Of course, kiddo." The billionaire, James Carter, leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "I know this is a big decision, and I don't expect an answer right away. Take your time." But Sarah already knew. This wasn't just about her. It was about Ethan. She had watched how their relationship had slowly changed over the past few weeks. James had gone from a distant father to someone who was genuinely trying. And Ethan, he had blossomed. The shy, hesitant boy who once struggled to hold a spoon now laughed freely, his confidence growing with each passing day. Sarah nodded, determination settling in. "I don't need time. I'm in." James's expression softened. He reached into his desk, pulling out a folder. "Then let's get started." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Sarah had never been to college, but now she was enrolled in an accelerated program focused on physical therapy for children with disabilities. It was exhausting, but she loved every second of it. Between her classes, she still met Ethan and James for dinner. But things were different now. James had changed. He no longer simply observed, he participated. He learned how to feed Ethan without hesitation, helped him practice small exercises, and even joked with him. One evening, as they sat in the restaurant where it all started, Ethan beamed up at Sarah. "Dad's been practicing with me every day." James smirked, nudging his son. "And he's been bossing me around." "No, Dad, hold it this way." "No, Dad, you're doing it wrong." Ethan giggled. "Well, you were doing it wrong." Ethan giggled. "Well, you were doing it wrong." Sarah laughed, shaking her head. "Sounds like you've got a great teacher." James looked at his son, something warm and deep in his eyes. "I do." Months passed. Sarah was excelling in her program, and her bond with Ethan grew stronger. She spent weekends at the Carter estate, helping with his therapy sessions, guiding James through new techniques, and simply being there for them. One evening, as she walked through the grand hallways of the Carter mansion, she paused at James's office door. It was slightly open, and she heard him speaking on the phone. "She's incredible," James was saying. "I've never met anyone like her." Sarah's breath caught. "I don't know, Mom," James continued. "It's not just about Ethan anymore. She's changed everything." Sarah quickly backed away, her heart hammering. Was he talking about her? She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought. James was a billionaire. She was just a waitress-turned-student. He wasn't thinking about her like that. Was he? The next day, James asked Sarah to meet him outside the mansion. When she arrived, she found him standing by the garden, watching the sunset. Ethan was inside, giving them a rare moment alone. James turned when he heard her approach. "I have something for you." Sarah frowned as he handed her an envelope. She opened it, her eyes widening at the sight of a check inside. But it wasn't just any check. It was enough to cover the rest of her education. She looked up at him, stunned. "James, I can't." "You can," he interrupted. "You will." She shook her head. "You've already done so much." "And I'll do more." His voice was firm. "You changed my son's life, Sarah. And mine. This isn't charity. It's an investment. In you. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, but the sincerity in his eyes silenced her. She swallowed hard. Thank you. James hesitated, then said softly, stay. Sarah's heart pounded. What? Stay here. At the estate. You spend so much time here anyway, and Ethan loves having you around. He hesitated. And so do I. Sarah felt her knees go weak. This was dangerous. She had built a wall around her heart for so long, refusing to believe that someone like James Carter could ever see her as more than just his son's caregiver. But the way he was looking at her now, it was different. She took a slow breath. Okay. James smiled. Okay. Living at the Carter estate was an adjustment. It was luxurious, but Sarah never let it change her. She still worked hard, still studied, still focused on her dream. But something else was happening, too. James was different around her now. It was in the way he sought her out, the way he lingered when they spoke, the way he seemed to notice the little things, when she was tired, when she needed a break, when she was deep in thought. One night, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, he finally said it. I don't think I would have made it without you. Sarah turned to him, surprised. I was lost, he admitted. Before you. I had all the money in the world, but I was failing the one person who needed me the most. He exhaled. You saved us, Sarah. She swallowed hard. You didn't need saving, James. You just needed to see what was already there. He smiled, reaching out to take her hand. She let him. And for the first time, Sarah realized maybe this wasn't just a story about a billionaire and his son. Maybe it was the start of something more. James held Sarah's hand gently, his thumb tracing small circles against her skin. The city lights twinkled in the distance, casting a golden glow over them. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she realized how much everything had changed. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. James wasn't the cold, distant billionaire she had met months ago. He was different now, softer, more present, more human. But even as warmth spread through her, a voice in her head whispered a warning. This isn't your world. She hesitated, pulling her hand back slowly. James. He looked at her, sensing the shift in her tone. What's wrong? She exhaled, shaking her head. I don't belong here. His brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Sarah gestured around. This life. Your world. It's not mine. She swallowed hard. You're a billionaire. I'm just a girl who used to serve coffee and wipe down tables. I can't. James reached for her hand again, but this time she stepped back. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Sarah, do you think any of that matters to me? She glanced at him, her emotions in turmoil. Maybe it should. James took a step closer. I don't care where you came from. I care about who you are. And Sarah, his voice dropped. You've become the most important person in my life. Her breath hitched. But before she could respond, a small voice interrupted. Are you guys fighting? They turned to see Ethan in the doorway, his expression worried. Sarah forced a smile, kneeling in front of him. No, buddy. Just talking. Ethan looked between them, then frowned. Dad, did you make Sarah sad? James let out a soft chuckle, kneeling beside her. I hope not. Ethan studied them both for a moment before nodding. Good. 'Cause I need Sarah. And so do you. James met Sarah's gaze, something unreadable in his eyes. And Sarah? She suddenly realized she was in deeper than she had ever intended. Over the next few weeks, things felt different. James didn't push her, but he didn't pull away either. He was patient, always there, always waiting. And Sarah? She couldn't deny it anymore. She had fallen. But just when she started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could let herself be happy, reality crashed down like a tidal wave. One afternoon, while helping Ethan with his therapy exercises, the doorbell rang. James answered it, and within seconds, Sarah heard a voice that sent a chill down her spine. James, darling, you've been avoiding me. A woman's voice. Smooth. Confident. Cold. Sarah peeked into the hallway and saw her. Tall. Stunning. Dressed in designer from head to toe. And the way she looked at James, it was possessive. James's jaw tightened. Olivia. Sarah's stomach twisted. Who was she? Olivia stepped inside, as if she owned the place. "It's been too long," she purred. Then her eyes landed on Sarah. She raised a perfectly shaped brow. "Oh, and who's this?" James hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Sarah." Olivia smirked. "Ah, the waitress." Sarah felt a flush creep up her neck, but she held her ground. Olivia turned back to James. "We need to talk. Alone." James sighed, glancing at Sarah apologetically before nodding. Sarah stood frozen as they disappeared into his office. Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "Sarah, who's that lady?" Sarah forced a smile. I don't know, buddy. But deep down, she had a feeling this woman was about to change everything." Minutes turned into an hour. Sarah busied herself with Ethan, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Finally, James emerged, his face unreadable. Olivia followed close behind, looking victorious. She paused near Sarah, tilting her head. "It was lovely meeting you." Sarah didn't respond. The moment Olivia left, James ran a hand down his face, looking exhausted. Sarah couldn't hold it in anymore. "Who is she?" James hesitated. "My ex-fiancée." Sarah's heart dropped. "She's back in town for business, and he stopped sighing. "She wants to fix things." Sarah took a step back. "And?" James looked at her, frustration clear in his eyes. "And I told her it's too late." Sarah's throat tightened. "Is it?" James stared at her, his gaze searching. "You think I'd throw everything away? After everything we've been through?" Sarah didn't know what to think. "Sarah," he said, his voice raw, "please, don't pull away." But the damage was already done. Because deep down, she realized something. She was terrified. Not of James. Not of Olivia. But of her own heart. Because falling for James Carter meant risking everything. And Sarah wasn't sure she was ready for that. Days passed, and the distance between them grew. James tried. He reached out. He asked her to talk. But Sarah avoided him. She focused on Ethan. On school. On anything but the fact that her heart ached every time she looked at James. Then one night, she found herself standing outside his office door again. He was on the phone. "I don't care what Olivia wants," he snapped. "Sarah is the one I." Silence. Sarah's breath caught. Slowly, she stepped inside. James looked up, startled. "Sarah." She swallowed hard. "What were you going to say?" He exhaled, setting his phone down. "That you're the one I want." Her heart pounded. "James." "I don't care about my past," he said, stepping closer. "I care about you." Tears burned at her eyes. "What if I'm not enough?" James cupped her face gently. "You already are." Sarah let out a shaky breath. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of laughter. Ethan was outside with James, the two of them playing by the pool. Sarah smiled, stepping onto the balcony. James looked up and grinned. "Morning." Ethan waved. "Sarah, come play." She laughed. "Maybe later." James watched her carefully. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah." For the first time in a long time, she really was. But just as she thought they were finally safe, the past came knocking again. Because later that night, Olivia returned. And this time, she wasn't alone. She brought someone with her. A man. And when Sarah saw him, her blood ran cold. Because she knew exactly who he was. Her past had finally caught up to her. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. James had always been a man who could sense danger before it arrived. It was an instinct honed from years of dealing with people who only saw him as a means to an end. But tonight, as Olivia stood in the doorway with a tall, sharp-dressed man at her side, a chill ran down his spine. Not because of Olivia. He had already dismissed her as a nuisance. But because of the way Sarah's face turned deathly pale. Her entire body tensed as if she had seen a ghost. The man beside Olivia wasn't just anyone. He had an air of authority, of quiet control, and something deeper, something dangerous. His dark eyes locked onto Sarah, and a slow, almost amused smirk curled at his lips. Olivia, sensing the tension, let out a soft chuckle, her fingers brushing lightly against the man's sleeve as if showing off a prized possession. James, Olivia purred, stepping forward, I believe you've met my associate Daniel Westwood. James didn't move. His gaze flickered between the man and Sarah, reading the unspoken panic in her eyes. He had never seen her like this. Sarah was strong, resilient, unshakable. Yet now, she looked as though the ground beneath her feet was cracking. Daniel's voice was smooth, almost mocking. It's been a long time, hasn't it, Sarah? Sarah couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. The past she had tried so hard to escape, the life she had buried deep, had found her again. James finally spoke, his voice controlled but edged with steel. Who is he, Sarah? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Her hands clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Olivia's smirk widened as she glanced at James. Oh, you didn't know? She sighed dramatically. Sarah has quite the history. James felt a slow burn of anger rising inside him. He turned to Sarah, waiting for an answer, but she looked trapped, like an animal cornered with no escape. Daniel took a step forward, exuding quiet menace. She never told you, did she? He tilted his head slightly, studying James as if assessing his worth. Interesting. James had seen enough. Get to the point. Daniel's smile never faltered. Sarah and I have unfinished business. James instinctively positioned himself between Sarah and Daniel, his protective instincts kicking in. I don't care what business you think you have with her. You're not welcome here. Daniel chuckled softly. That's not up to you. His gaze flicked to Sarah. Is it, sweetheart? The way he said it, sweetheart, made James's stomach turn. He glanced at Sarah, searching for an explanation, but she just stood there, frozen in place, her breathing shallow. Finally, she whispered, Daniel, please don't do this. James's hands curled into fists. You're scaring her. Daniel let out a soft sigh, shaking his head. No, James. I'm reminding her. He turned back to Sarah. You thought you could disappear? That you could just start a new life, and I wouldn't find you. He took another step closer. I let you run once. That was my mistake. James's patience snapped. I don't know who the hell you think you are, but I'm not letting you near her. Daniel's eyes darkened. And what exactly do you think you can do to stop me? The room was thick with tension. James was powerful, wealthy, and connected, but Daniel wasn't afraid of him, and that made him dangerous. Sarah finally found her voice, even though it trembled. Daniel, you don't own me. Daniel's smile turned cold. Oh, but I do. James stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. I want you to leave. Now. Olivia, who had been watching with amusement, sighed. James, darling, you're overreacting. This is just a misunderstanding. James turned his glare on her. You brought him here. That was your second mistake. Don't make a third. Olivia rolled her eyes, but Daniel only laughed. Relax, Carter. I'm not here to start a fight. I just wanted to see Sarah, to remind her that no matter how far she runs, she'll always belong to me. Sarah shuddered, and James felt something inside him snap. You need to get out, James said again, his voice firm. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then smirked. For now. He looked at Sarah once more, his voice dropping to a whisper. But we'll see each other again. Soon. And just like that, he turned and walked away. Olivia gave Sarah a pitying look before following him out the door, leaving a silence so heavy it felt suffocating. James turned to Sarah, his heart still pounding. What the hell was that? Sarah's eyes were wet, her hands shaking. She looked like she wanted to run, but James wouldn't let her. Not this time. Talk to me, he said, softer now. Who is he? Sarah took a deep breath, but it didn't steady her. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. He's my past, she finally whispered. And I never wanted you to meet him. James sat beside her, his voice gentle but firm. Tell me everything. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered. I used to be engaged to him. James stilled. Sarah exhaled shakily. I was young. Stupid. I thought he loved me. But Daniel, he wasn't just controlling. He was cruel. He isolated me, made me dependent on him. And when I finally got the courage to leave, he didn't take it well. James clenched his jaw. Did he hurt you? Sarah hesitated. Then, finally, she nodded. In more ways than one. James's hands tightened into fists, rage boiling under his skin. He had seen scars before, the kind people carried on their bodies, and the kind they hid inside. Sarah had been hiding hers for a long time. He's not getting near you again, James said, his voice like iron. Sarah let out a broken laugh. You don't understand, James. He's powerful, and he doesn't let go. James met her gaze, unwavering. Neither do I. Sarah searched his face, as if trying to believe him. You don't know what you're getting into. James gently cupped her face. I don't care. You're not alone in this. A tear slipped down her cheek, and for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to fight this battle alone. But deep down, she knew the war wasn't over. Because Daniel never made empty threats. And the next time he came back, he wouldn't be alone. Sarah barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, Daniel's voice echoed in her head, dragging her back into the past she had fought so hard to escape. She had spent years looking over her shoulder, always expecting to see him lurking in the shadows, always waiting for the moment when he would finally come for her. And now he had. She had fooled herself into thinking she was safe, that she could build something real with James, that she could have a life where fear wasn't her constant companion. But Daniel had shattered that illusion in a single night. He had reminded her of who he was, what he was capable of. And worst of all, he had made it clear that he wasn't going to stop. James could see it in her eyes the next morning. The fear, the exhaustion, the weight of something that had crushed her spirit for too long. He wanted to tell her it would be okay, that he would fix everything, that no one would ever hurt her again. But he also knew that words meant nothing against a man like Daniel. Men like him thrived on fear, on control, on the belief that no one could stand in their way. The only way to stop him was to hit harder, to strike before he had the chance to sink his claws in deeper. James had built his empire from the ground up, had faced enemies more ruthless than Daniel, and he had won every time. But this wasn't just business. This was personal. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, stirring a cup of coffee she hadn't taken a sip from. I should leave, she murmured, barely loud enough for him to hear. If I disappear, maybe he'll stop. James leaned against the counter, arms crossed, anger simmering beneath the surface. That's exactly what he wants, he said. To see you scared. To see you run. If you give him that, he wins. She looked up at him, eyes glassy, with unshed tears. You don't understand. He doesn't stop. He doesn't let go. He will do anything to make sure I remember that I belong to him. James's jaw tightened. You don't belong to anyone, and I'm not letting him take you from me. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. You can't fight him, James. He stepped closer, tilting her chin up so she had no choice but to look at him. Watch me. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that James Carter, the billionaire who could make or break entire industries, was powerful enough to stop the monster that had haunted her for years. But Daniel wasn't just a businessman. He was something darker, something dangerous. She had seen firsthand what he did to people who defied him, and she couldn't bear the thought of James becoming another casualty. But James had already made up his mind. While Sarah stayed hidden in his penthouse, he made a call to one of the few men he trusted with his life. Find everything you can on Daniel Westwood, he ordered. I want to know his weaknesses, his enemies, the skeletons he thinks are buried. And I want it yesterday. Hours passed in silence. Sarah barely spoke, and James didn't push her. He knew she needed time to process, to gather whatever strength she had left. But when his phone finally rang, and the voice on the other end said, "You're going to want to see this," James knew exactly what needed to be done. He left Sarah under strict security and drove to a location only a handful of people knew existed. A private office, untouched by the outside world, where deals were made and wars were won. His contact, a man named Victor, slid a folder across the table. Westwood thinks he's untouchable, Victor said. But no one's untouchable. James flipped open the folder, scanning the documents, the photos, the proof of crimes that Daniel had kept hidden. Extortion, blackmail, threats, even whispers of murder. He had built an empire on fear, on silence, on making sure that no one dared to stand against him. But James wasn't just anyone. Victor leaned back in his chair. So what's the plan? James's eyes darkened as he closed the folder. We take everything from him. It started slowly. The businesses Daniel owned began facing financial audits, investors pulling out without warning, key employees resigning overnight. The politicians, who once turned a blind eye to his crimes, suddenly refused to take his calls. The underground contacts who supplied him with power and protection began distancing themselves, sensing that something was coming. Daniel was too smart not to notice, and he didn't take it well. The first attack came in the middle of the night. James's security intercepted the men before they reached the penthouse, but it was a warning, a reminder that Daniel wasn't going to back down without a fight. But James had been expecting that. The next day, a file landed on Daniel's desk. Every crime he had committed, every secret he had buried, every loose end he thought was tied up. The message was clear: walk away or I bury you. Daniel wasn't afraid of threats, but he was afraid of losing control. That night, he made his move. James was waiting. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city was the perfect place for a final confrontation. Daniel arrived alone, as expected, arrogance radiating off him like a shield. But James had long since stopped playing by the rules. "You've been a very busy man," Daniel said, his voice deceptively calm. James smirked. "So have you. But unlike you, I don't need to hide my crimes." Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. "You think this ends with a few bad investments and some legal trouble? I built this city, Carter. I don't lose." James stepped closer, his presence an unshakable force. "You already have." And then, from the shadows, law enforcement officers emerged, weapons drawn, badges glinting under the dim light. Daniel's face barely flickered with surprise before two officers grabbed him, forcing him to the ground. "You set me up," Daniel growled. James crouched beside him, voice low. "No, Daniel. You set yourself up. I just made sure the right people were watching." As the officers dragged Daniel away, James exhaled, knowing this was only part of the battle. Sarah still had scars that couldn't be erased overnight. She had wounds that no amount of money or power could heal. But now at least she was free. When he returned home, Sarah was waiting. Her eyes searched his face, desperate for answers. "Is it over?" she whispered. James pulled her into his arms, holding her tighter than ever before. "Yes," he murmured. "It's over." She broke down then, years of fear and pain spilling out in the safety of his embrace. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness was possible. The nightmare was over.